This video will be looking at Unit 4. Unit 4 is over the nervous system and the immune system, first covering the nervous system in 5 parts. Last unit we learned about the idea of the signal transduction pathway, and that is reception, transduction, and response. The nervous system works in a very similar fashion. The nervous system also uses electrical energy created through the passage of ions across a membrane. And so this is sodium ions, potassium ions primarily are going to be featured here. And so that will be a common theme. And just quickly on the evolution of nervous systems found in animals. The beginning, or the first evolutionary hints of the nervous system, were the nerve nets found in cnidarians, which are here on this one. You have a picture of a hydra. We think of normally when we think of cnidarians, we think of like jellyfish. And a nerve net, as you can see, there's no centralization, there's no processing. There's basically just simple detection of sensory, but there's no processing of that sensory input, so there's no way to consider it or think about it, only to receive it. And as animals have developed, you have the formation of a central nervous system and also the formation of a head. And the formation of a head in evolutionary history is called cephalization. Formation of a head means that you're going to have a centralization of the nervous system, what we think of as a brain, spinal cord, and with that is going to come processing. Integration is what we're going to call that, and then response. And so that leads us to the 3 parts of the nervous system that we're going to be talking about. First part is sensory input. This is input received from the outside world. It could be from any of the 5 senses, and that sensory input is going to be some form of energy. It's going to be light energy, it's going to be pressure or heat or vibrations, or even smell and taste are chemical energy. And that energy is going to be transformed into the nerve cells into the form of electricity. And so you're going to have this transference and transformation of energy going from one form to another, and the nervous system is going to translate that into electricity. The second part is integration. And integration is where the nervous system takes that signal and thinks about it, processes it. What is it going to do with it? So you get input and then you integrate it into your brain. Meaning, integrate means to make it a part of. You're going to take that input, you're going to make it a part of everything that you already know. You hear a sound, a loud sound, for instance, and you're going to take that and you're going to integrate it. Usually loud sounds mean danger, and so you're going to start to process, or maybe it's a loud sound you've heard 100 times and it doesn't scare you anymore, and so that's all a part of that processing. And then the final step is the motor output. Motor means movement, and so typically this is going to be one of 2 outputs. It's either going to be muscular in response, or it's going to be glandular, like some sort of gland that's going to secrete a hormone. And the receiver of this output is always called an effector cell, some sort of cell that's going to receive that information. Could be a muscle cell, could be a gland, either way, that's going to be the output. And so here you have a mirror of the reception, transduction, response of the signal transduction pathway. You have a mirror of that here in the nervous system. A couple other terms: the central nervous system versus the peripheral nervous system. Central nervous system, the brain and the spinal cord. This is where all integration occurs. The peripheral nervous system is the everything else, essentially. This is the receiving portion of the central nervous system and the sending portion of the central of the nervous system, meaning this is what's going to receive the input from the outside and then also do the thing that the brain says to do. A little bit about nerve structure here, you have here this is a nerve cell, oftentimes called a neuron instead of a nerve cell. You can use interchangeably. And you can see that the nerve cell has a cell body here. The cell body is going to contain the nucleus and all the cell parts that we know and love. And then there's some other parts. You have the dendrites. The dendrites are the receiving portion of the neuron. It is going to be receiving information from the outside. Either could be from sensory input, it could be from another nerve. Nonetheless, that information is going to be gathered here in the cell body. All of that electricity, essentially. And then it is going to be sent out through a single piece called the axon. And so the axon is the sending portion of the neuron. It is going to send that signal. You can imagine all the signal being gathered up into the cell body and shot out. The axon is one signal from the neuron. That neuron is covered in a substance called the myelin sheath. The myelin sheath is created by cells called Schwann cells, and those Schwann cells create this myelin sheath, and the myelin sheath has two functions. It insulates the signal, and so much like the plastic covering of a phone charger cord, it's going to insulate that signal so that the cord actually works. The signal's not jumping outside of the bounds of the wire, but is actually staying contained in the wire. And also, it's going to protect the surrounding tissues. Just like when you pick up your phone charger cord, it doesn't shock you. The myelin sheath is going to protect the surrounding tissues from being shocked. And so that sheath has a very important function. Next, we're going to look at this portion of the axon. It is the end of the axon, or the terminal, and so it's called the axon terminal or the synaptic terminal. Here's a close-up of that. The reason it's called the synaptic terminal is because this space in between the axon and this next cell, some sort of effector cell, it could be another nerve, a muscle, a gland, there's a space here, and the space prevents the nerve from actually shocking that other cell. And we'll talk more about how the signal is passed along that space, but this space is called the synapse. Here's the axon terminal, and the signal, the chemical that is passed across the synaptic area is called a neurotransmitter. This is a chemical that is used to transmit the signal through the synapse as opposed to using electricity. And so we'll talk more about that in a later video. A couple other accessory terms to know when it comes to the nervous system. There are some cells called glial cells. These are supporting cells for neurons to hang on to. If you want to think of them as like the frame of a house, the walls and the doors and all the pieces of the house hang on to that frame. And so in your brain and in your spinal cord and all your other nerves, these cells serve as a function to hold the nervous system together. We talked about the Schwann cells already creating the myelin sheath. The Schwann cells of the brain are called oligodendrocytes because we needed another term for that. Oligio, it means like the head or the leader, and so are the most important. And so these are just the Schwann cells of the brain. They create the myelin sheath for the brain.